Nothing like a nice, tasty brew. Oh, hello there. Oh, don't mind me. I was just having a bit of a break. Having a nice brew. Before, of course, we do some reading on some lore. We shall, of course, visit our good friend Lore Walker Cho to delve into the lore behind each of the monks' artifact weapons, which, of course, span many years of history. Don't be surprised if you hear that voice as I'm reading these. That's kind of one of my Pandaren voices, the old wise Pandaren. I'm sure those of you who perhaps did some questing in Missa Pandaria and such know what I'm talking about. There's the bubbling keg. I already got my bonuses from that. Hey Chen. The Wandering Isle. I don't care what anyone says. Pandaria was an awesome expansion. I love Pandaria, love the Pandarans, which were not inspired by Kung Fu Panda, I want to remind everyone, because the Pandarans were actually created by Blizzard years before that movie ever came out. So the people who say that are factually wrong. Just want to point that out. I'm one of those who gets very tired and irritated about hearing that. And of course, the Monk is an awesome class. One of the best classes to play in the game. All 3 specs. I used to only be able to play Windwalker and Mistweaver, but then I took some time to really try and learn how to play Brewmaster. And I actually tanked a few dungeons as Brewmaster, and you know what? It's actually pretty fun. And, I mean, I wouldn't say I'm a great Brewmaster. I still have some learning and practice to do, but still, I've actually come to really enjoy it. And of course,
where are we going today, Grandmaster?
Ban Lu, one of the best class hall mounts in the game. Not only does he look awesome, but of course he talks to you. And yes, he is a flying mount. So we've been putting this off, partly because I was working on getting one of the secret appearances. By the way, I love that as a Brewmaster, you just kind of carry your staff over one arm, like over a shoulder. I just love that. That's great. You know what's also awesome here in the class hall? If you want to go to the place where the lore is for the weapons, you don't find a gigantic book. You go here, and it's a gigantic long scroll. It's a very long scroll. And I love that because that is so Pandaren. And it's also so Monk. And of course, who else would be the archivist for the Monk Order Hall and Legion other than the one and only Lore Walker Cho?
Pandaria welcomes you.
Papaneeks, it is good to see you again. Is there anything that I can do for you? Why can't I research my artifact knowledge anymore? The Orders are sharing their resources, and you are no longer required to research artifact knowledge. Therefore, we have researched all possible artifact knowledge. Of course, voiced by the great Jim Cummings, the one and only. The Chronicle of Ages, as recorded by the Chronicles of the Broken Temple. But we all know Lord Walker Cho's the one who put this together. By the way, this is the secret appearance for the Brewmaster artifact, which I believe is called... I thought it showed the name of this, but I believe it has to do with the Monkey King, which is great because that actually has a lot to do with the history of the weapon, as we're about to read. Fuzan, the Wanderer's Companion. You may have heard that this legendary staff was once carried by a Hosen. That concerned us a lot. We examined it thoroughly, and you will be pleased to hear that there was no damage done to this artifact that we cannot fix. And as it turns out, we aren't giving the Monkey King enough credit. He is not the most reverent creature on Azeroth, but he has a healthy respect for this weapon. He even helped us understand its true power. Fuzan has certainly been through a strange journey. Long ago... Hold on a second. Before we get underway, let me get my drink over here. my brew. Just to refresh my throat. After all, if you were going to be a brewmaster, you should have a brew. And remember, brew is not just alcohol. Brew is also tea. For those of you who are avid tea drinkers. Long ago, Keeper Freya. I hope you enjoy this music, by the way. I just love the music of this Order Hall. But then again, I loved a ton of the music of Pandaria. If you enjoyed the Pandaria music, you're hopefully going to enjoy this as I read this. Keeper Freya sculpted an ethereal plane of existence, the Emerald Dream. To act as a guide for Azeroth's natural life, she crafted and planted one tree near the powerful energy of the Vale of Eternal Blossoms. It grew strong and tall, drinking deeply from the Vale's resonant power. More trees arose around it, lush forests both in the dream and in the waking world, sprang to life across the region. Keeper Freya named the tree Fuzan and shaped one of its branches into a walking stick for her long journeys. From the beginning, this staff has accompanied legendary creatures and immortal spirits as they carried out important, lasting work all across Azeroth. It also fell into the possession of the Monkey King that came later. Do you mind? I'm in the middle of reading something. In the early days of Azeroth's revival, natural life flourished strongly in the enclaves where the Keeper Freya did her most intensive work. A small number of exceptional wild animals grew far beyond expectations, showing such remarkable power that they would soon be known as the Wild Gods. Each of these beings had a different personality, but Freya noticed that 4 in particular shared a deep commitment to peace and wisdom. These 4, a serpent, an ox, a crane, and a tiger, had gathered near the Vale of Eternal Blossoms. Freya knew their compassion would aid the region well. Indeed, they would be called the August Celestials by the inhabitants of Pandaria. One day, Freya came to the Celestials with concern in her heart. There was a great darkness in the north, she told them, and she believed a confrontation was near. She gave them her staff for safekeeping. Let me, there we go. Try and give you guys a better view of this appearance here. Where was my place? I lost my place. Oh, staff for safekeeping. If I do not see you again, return this staff to Azeroth, to one of its children, she said. Give it to someone who loathes battle and loves peace. Freya never returned. Yulon, the Jade Serpent, vowed to keep the staff safe. For thousands of years, even during the dark reign of the Mogu Empire, she did just that. In the south, near the Vale of Eternal Blossoms, many new creatures arose, forming tribes, villages, and even empires. There were the Jinyu, the Pandaren, the Hosen, and others. Yulon suspected that if Fuzan would pass to one of these beings, it would go to a Jinyu or a Pandaren. Surely the Hosen were too innately violent to be trusted with such a gift. They were often selfish and short-sighted, unable to work together long enough to build a proper civilization of their own. But as time passed, Yulon questioned her assumptions. There were different forms of wisdom and courage, were there not? It was easy to see the short-lived, short-tempered Hosen as troublemakers, but they lived full lives, wild lives, in the years they had. Yulon felt Fuzan begin to awaken. It needed a new companion. The Jade Serpent knew that soon she would honor Freya's wishes and allow a worthy mortal to carry Fuzan, and she was becoming certain that it needed to be given to a Hosen. Give it to someone who loathes battle and loves peace. Freya's... Oh, this is actually one of the first pages I've ever had to actually scroll down. Freya's words became clear the moment that Yulon laid eyes upon one exceptional Hosen. He called himself the Monkey King. Long ago, only a few years before the War of the Ancients, he had become the leader of an ungovernable people. He had risen to power without spilling a single drop of blood. he was beloved by every Hosen tribe. How had he done this? After all, Hosen fought endlessly, constantly, for the simplest reasons. Any disagreement meant physical violence. The Monkey King knew this, so he told the Hosen tribes, "I am the Monkey King. Your tribe supports me with all its heart." That was all. When a single Hosen would question him, he would tell them that their tribe's leader had already agreed to it. No Hosen wanted to challenge their leader on a whim and be in a fight, so they declared, "You are the Monkey King." When the tribe leaders learned his name, all of his subjects were already calling him the Monkey King. They were confused, but they did not want to fight their people, so they did not challenge him either. I love how he manipulated this. That is so great. That is so great and so Monkey King. I love that. That's absolutely the kind of thing I would expect him to do, to be able to get this kind of thing settled without having any violence happen. That's amazing. The Monkey King's wild claim, his lie, eventually became true, because nobody dared to disagree with it. Soon tribal fighting had ceased. The Monkey King passed judgment on all disputes. The Hosen obeyed. The Jade Serpent could see the Monkey King's motivation. It was simple. He disliked the sight of blood. At the most fundamental level, this was a creature who loathed battle and loved peace. And from that, he had achieved what no other Hosen ever had. Yulan needed to know how deep the Monkey King's cleverness ran. She visited him in disguise. All the Monkey King saw was another Hosen. But this one did not call him king or bow before him. He demanded that she show respect. Instead, the newcomer asked him a riddle, telling him that a true king would have no trouble answering it. He snapped out the correct answer in seconds. She gave him another. He answered again. On and on they went, for 3 days and 3 nights. The Monkey King grew enraged, but even in his anger, he continued to answer her questions. Yulan was convinced. Violence and tyranny were not in the Monkey King's nature, or he would have tried to shut her up with force long ago. She revealed her true form, which caused considerable chaos in that Hosen village, and presented him with Fuzan. The Jade Serpent told him the story of Freya and how the staff had come to be. Then she warned him. She sensed that one day his cleverness would not be enough to stop evil. When that day came, he would need to act decisively. The Monkey King did not believe her, but he did think that the staff was very, very pretty. With Fuzan in his grasp, the Monkey King's authority over the Hosen became absolute. He could bend like a willow in the wind, avoiding any blow from a challenger to the throne. The staff was as light as a feather, and yet anyone who tried to steal it found that they could not lift it an inch. It was his. No one else was allowed to wield it. So was Mjolnir. They were not worthy. But there was a serious problem with Fuzan. To look regal while carrying it, the Monkey King needed to use 2 hands. That meant that he had no free hand for his most prized possession, a small keg that he always kept filled with brew. But that was easy to solve. The Monkey King had 2 metal bands added to the end of Fuzan and hung his keg from them. Luckily, the staff was not permanently damaged. I like the idea that this here you're seeing is actually a keg filled with brew, because that's what the Monkey King wanted it to be. The Monkey King became fast friends with a young Pandaren prince named Xiao Hao. The day of Xiao Hao's coronation, the new emperor learned that all the land was at risk of being destroyed by the Burning Legion's first invasion of Azeroth. The Monkey King believed that Yulan's prophecy had come to pass. This was the day that he needed to face evil directly. He declared that he would stay by Xiao Hao's side until the end. But fate had other plans. A great ill wind roared from the east and carried the Monkey King far away. The Monkey King was blown into the lands of the Mantid. All of his cleverness counted for nothing there. He was helpless, about to die at their hands, when Xiao Hao rescued him. The Monkey King was enraged, but the Mantid were not his enemy. Xiao Hao reminded him that the Burning Legion was the true threat. And in the end, it was not violence that saved the peoples of Pandaria. Xiao Hao released his spirit to the land, shrouding it in mist and protecting it from the destruction of the Sundering. The Monkey King went home and hurled Fuzan into a river in a fit of rage. His friend had vanished, and the Monkey King had seemingly failed Yulan's prophecy. Eventually, he went to the river to retrieve the staff, but only because those waters were sacred for a Jinyu tribe, and they could not remove it themselves. It was too heavy. It still belonged to the Monkey King. After the Sundering, Pandaria was isolated from the rest of the world. The Emperor was gone. There would never be another. Some believed that all the other lands had been destroyed. Others wanted to explore the world beyond the mists. And a few wanted to claim Pandaria for themselves, with force. Not much has been written of this brief surge of would-be tyrants. Very few of Pandaria's denizens were harmed by any of them. Whether they were Mogu warlords, fringe Hosen tribes, or even brutal Yangol raiders, none of them ever launched a true campaign of conquest. Before they could, they were always approached by a mysterious Hosen who would chatter endlessly about a hidden cache of artifacts that had granted him untold power. He could demonstrate miracles. No weapon could touch him, no matter how many combatants tried to attack him. It was very convincing. These ambitious, greedy beings would eagerly follow the Monkey King's directions. Sometimes they would walk off a cliff. Sometimes they would find themselves ambushed by Shadowpan. In any case, their story always came to a quick end, and the Monkey King would stride away, Fuzan resting easily across his shoulders. The Monkey King had never had such fun. Turning evil beings into stumbling fools became his most cherished pastime for years. He saw it as his way of honoring his old friend Xiao Hao, who now watched over the land but could no longer protect Pandaria's peoples directly. But just as Yulan had told him, his cleverness would one day not be enough to defeat evil. A Mogu despot called the Jade Warlord had followed the Monkey King's directions, traveling deep into a tomb beneath Kunlai, but rather than finding nothing, as the Hosen had expected, the Jade Warlord found an ancient cache of knowledge, written by the Thunder King, Lei Shen. In the Warlord's hands, it would grant him terrible, awful power. The Monkey King knew that he had made a mistake, and as the ground began to shake, he knew that there was no time for anyone else to stop the Mogu. He took Fuzan and went into the tomb to deal with the problem directly. The Monkey King loathed violence. He detested it. But he also knew that he was the only one who could oppose the Jade Warlord before it was too late. The two of them dueled beneath Kunlai for hours. For years, Fuzan had been an aid to the Monkey King's mischief. That proved to be excellent practice for avoiding the powerful, lethal magic that the Mogu soon unleashed. The Monkey King believed that he would not leave the tomb alive that day. Indeed, he did not. But he was not killed. The Jade Warlord had no command of his new power, and an errant spell did what neither of them expected. It froze them both in jade. They remained there, locked in battle, for almost 10,000 years, able to communicate all the while. That must have been a fate worse than death for the Mogu. Once the Monkey King was freed, he traveled to the Timeless Isle, and watched as the august Celestials taught the champions of Azeroth, us, lessons in strength, endurance, courage, and wisdom. After some time had passed, the Monkey King sensed that his travels with Fuzan were nearing their end. So he traveled to the temple of Yulan and passed the staff back into her care so that one day it could again be given up to another who was worthy to wield it. He was even happy to hear that it would soon be carried into battle again. Which leads to the quest of us going to the temple in order to retrieve it. And I like the implication that this staff was had that aspect of Mjolnir attached to it, that it would only be wielded by someone who was worthy to wield it, otherwise it was too heavy to lift. Alright. Now for Mistweaver, one of my favorite healing specs in the game. And I actually just got this secret appearance for the staff to drop in the Emerald Nightmare. Once I got that to drop, I was like, oh, great, now I can make that monk video. But yeah, I really enjoy playing Mistweaver. Definitely one of my favorite healing specs to play in the game. Before we read about Shaylun, the Staff of the Mist, let me take another sip of brew. It's not actually brew that I'm drinking, but may as well play up the whole monk Pandaren thing, right? Right, Cho? So yeah, this is the secret appearance. It drops from the Dragons of Nightmare and the Emerald Nightmare. Very, kind of a play on the whole dragon feel to it. I like the gong in the middle, by the way. And you can compare it to, you see the default appearance there with the bell in the middle and such. Really cool looking staff. Really like it. Do you know of Xiao Hao? Of Kang, the Fist of First Dawn? Of Zuen, the White Tiger? Do you know of the terrible trials that the Pandaren people overcame thousands of years ago? Shaylun is living proof that conflict can be endured, that tyranny can be overcome, that disaster can be averted, and that a caring heart can make it all possible. Shaylun will aid you greatly in the tribulations to come. Carry it with pride, and use it to bring your comrades home alive. It feels strange to call Shaylun powerful, does it not? You could use it to flatten a mountain with a single blow. You could not use it to flatten a mountain with a single blow, nor could you use it to burn 1,000 enemies alive with a single thought. Others might find that disappointing. But you are a monk. You know power takes many forms. Others desire the might of a waterfall crashing down on the rocks. You seek the calm, inevitable force of a deep river, the kind that carves canyons into the toughest stone and carries away warriors on its currents without so much as a ripple. Shaylun is the embodiment of that idea. A quote by Master Sun Tzu, Mistweaver of the Terrace of Endless Spring. This staff has seen many battles in Pandaria. It was there when a slave toppled an empire of slave masters. It was there when an emperor saved an entire continent from death. Shaylun contains the legacy of ancient days and ancient spirits. In the hands of those who help others, this staff is very powerful indeed. Long before the Sundering, long before the southern end of Azeroth was known as Pandaria, there was an explosion of life in a particular valley. 4 animal spirits were drawn to that place, the Vale of Eternal Blossoms, and they were in awe at its potential and its power. At that time, dark forces had eyes on the Vale's secrets. A Titan Keeper and his armies of Mogu protected the land from the Mantid and other outside threats. But there was no guidance for what was growing within. These 4 spirits chose to make this place their home. They were Zuen, the White Tiger, Yulan, the Jade Serpent, Chi-Ji, the Red Crane, and Niuzao. I always have trouble pronouncing that. Niuzao, the Black Ox. They would become known as the August Celestials. Under their care, many different life forms emerged near the Vale of Eternal Blossoms. Among them were the wise Jinyu, the mischievous Hosen, and the peaceful Pandaren. They worshipped the August Celestials, and in return the spirits offered them knowledge and guidance. For a time, there was peace. The peace of the Vale did not last. The terror of the Thunder King shattered everything. A Mogu warlord named Lei Shen revolted against his master, the Keeper Ra Den, seizing his power and crowning himself the Emperor of all Mogu. And of all who lived within his domain, he enslaved those who surrendered and killed those who did not. First he conquered the small fledgling Jinyu Empire and their Hosen rivals. The Pandaren fled to the harsh climate of Kunlai Summit, seeking the protection of Zuen, the White Tiger. Zuen offered them sanctuary for a time, but soon Lei Shen brought an army to the Kunlai foothills. Rather than launching an attack, he issued a challenge. Zuen would come forth and duel with the Thunder King. Victory meant that the Pandaren would live free. Defeat meant the enslavement of them all. Refusal meant summary execution. Zuen accepted the challenge. The duel between the Celestial of Strength and the Thunder King shook the skies for days. In the end, Zuen fell. Lei Shen did not have him killed. Instead, he took him to the highest peak, Mount Neverest, and had him bound there, forced to watch the Pandaren being led into an era of slavery that would last for thousands of years. But although Zuen was imprisoned, he was not idle. It is here that the story of this staff truly begins. For millennia, Zuen was alone, able to do nothing but watch the Mogu Empire inflict unforgivable cruelty on its slaves. And then he saw the seeds of revolution take hold. It began with a single Pandaren, Kang, who believed the Mogu Empire's reliance on slave labor made it weak. He learned how to fight without weapons, using the strength of his opponents against them, and taught it to many others. Soon he and his followers escaped to Kunlai, where they honed their abilities and philosophies in secret. One day, Kang climbed to the top of Mount Neverest to meditate, and instead found Zuen. The White Tiger's isolation had not made him angry or bitter. It had simply made him eager to help. He guided Kang and the other novice monks in the ways of strength, not simply the strength of raw power, but the strength of endurance. Look to the little life that you can find in these heights, Zuen told him, and you will know strength. Remember, Zuen's character is voiced by the same guy who voices Tyrael in Diablo, so it's sometimes hard to replicate that very deep, epic voice that he has. Kang looked and saw scattered, isolated trees growing along the Kunlai ridgelines. They were twisted and gnarled, but he soon understood that they needed to be. They had to endure biting winds and harsh sleet. Their trunks needed to be sturdy and strong, their roots deep. It was those trees that formed the halls of the monks' monastery and supplied the wood from which they crafted their first weapons, not blades, as their enemies had, but staves. Kang brought his to Zuen, who blessed it. Kang named it Shaylun, after his son, who had died to the Mogu's cruelty years before. Kang carried Shaylun for years, all throughout the Pandaren Revolution. The staff did not win the war. It was Kang's words that galvanized the Mogu slaves, and it was Kang's will that drove him onward when all seemed lost. On some days, Shaylun was a mere walking stick. But some days, it was all that kept the Mogu's swords and axes from carving his heart from his chest. Shaylun was there the day that Kang died, as he gave his life to topple the last Mogu emperor. With that sacrifice, the former slave freed all of Pandaria. Shaylun was brought back to the monastery in the mountains, serving as a quiet symbol of what could be accomplished through the strength of inner harmony. The monastery itself, however, was not quiet at all. It had never been busier. Zuen warned the monks that, although they were free, they had inherited the responsibility to protect Pandaria from the evil minds that wished to claim it. Every 100 years, the mantid, dangerous insectoid creatures, would swarm the land. All that stood in their way were the brave souls who would fight atop the serpent's spine, a great wall protecting Pandaria from the mantid's ravaging mayhem. The monks who remained in Kunlai dedicated themselves to preparing for this threat. And every 100 years, Pandaren monks lined the top of the serpent's spine to face the overwhelming waves of mantid and risk their lives to protect their land. Zuen would always allow one Mistweaver to carry Shaylun into this centennial battle. It is impossible to say how many lives were saved by those who carried this staff. It is impossible to say how many of its bearers died in service to Pandaria. But their sacrifices were not in vain. The wall still stands, even today. Almost 10,000 years ago, this staff passed into the possession of the last Emperor of Pandaria. Perhaps you've heard his story, but please understand, before Emperor Xiaohao became a legend, he was an untested, uncertain young Pandaren, completely unaware of the burdens that he would bear. On the day of Xiaohao's coronation, a monk from Kunlai presented him with the gift of Shaylun. The new emperor did not know its importance. He did not even recognize the monk as being sent by Zuen, the white tiger. He merely thought it was a pretty ornament. Xiaohao believed that he was destined for a life of comfort and ease. Pandaria had been a peaceful land for generations. Why would he believe that would change? A Jinyu water speaker received a vision of the future that shook Xiaohao's confidence. Soon, very soon, an army of demons would invade Azeroth, and the damage would be catastrophic. Pandaria would not survive the devastation that would follow. Xiaohao was greatly distressed. He sought out the advice of Yulan the Jade Serpent, who told him that he would save no one if he did not rein in his emotions, which were out of control and dangerous. Xiaohao would travel to Pandaria in search of the wisdom that would save his land. This staff, Zuen's gift, it accompanied him. This journey would change Pandaria forever. Xiaohao set out on his travels with his friend, the mischievous and playful Monkey King. Before they got far, a great wind surrounded them. The Monkey King was carried away, disappearing into the distance. It was an event unlike any Xiaohao had ever seen, and he soon found himself struggling to keep up. Doubt and despair rose up in the Emperor's mind, and then they rose up outside of his mind, taking form as monstrous creatures. When the Jade Serpent told him that his emotions were dangerous, she had been speaking of the Shah, ancient shadows of a fallen old god. The terrifying Shah of doubt and the Shah of despair confronted Xiaohao. To dispel them, Xiaohao had to listen to Qiji, the Red Crane, and let go of those emotions, ridding himself of their burdens. He continued his pursuit of his friend, following him all the way across the serpent's spine and into the land of the Mantid. When Xiaohao looked upon the Mantid lands from the serpent's spine, he was frozen with fear. To cross into their territory was to risk almost certain death. The Shah of Fear held him immobile, paralyzing his thoughts. Niu Zhao, the Black Ox, was there to remind him that fear only controlled his mind, not his feet. Xiaohao understood, wrestled himself free of fear, and walked on. Xiaohao saved the Monkey King from the Mantid's clutches and brought them both back to safety. Now, without fear or despair or doubt, Xiaohao believed himself ready to face the Burning Legion's might. But he saw no need to face it alone. He wanted an army to command, so he climbed Kunlai and finally came face to face with Zuen. The monastery atop Kunlai had changed over the years. What had once been the only refuge for free minds was now the training grounds for the most dedicated fighters in the land. These were the souls who trained to fight the Mantid and all of Pandaria's other enemies. Xiaohao came to them confidently, demanding that they submit to his authority. Zuen saw that he was carrying his coronation gift, this staff, Shaylun, but that it had been nothing more to him than a walking stick. The White Tiger also saw that the Emperor had rid himself of a great many dangerous emotions, but not anger. No, Xiaohao's anger towards the Legion made him brash and reckless. "Why do you fight?" Zuen asked. "To destroy demon hordes, to crush those that oppose me," Xiaohao declared. Zuen offered a simple challenge. Strike a single one of these monks, and you will have command of them all. Xiao Hao accepted. He swung Shaylun over and over again, but he struck nothing at all. The monks were too skilled. They easily evaded him. Xiao Hao's humiliation and anger built up, and then they exploded. A great darkness burst forth from him, and in his rage, Xiao Hao broke Shaylun over his knee and lashed out with the power of the Shah of Anger. When he regained his senses, a monk lay dead, the victim of Xiao Hao's unchecked aggression. Zuen watched the Emperor's heart break for the life that he had taken, and then Xiao Hao knelt humbly, accepting his failure, ridding himself of anger forever. Again I ask, why do you fight? Zuen said. For the people I protect, Xiao Hao replied. For them I would give my final breath. Xiao Hao was now ready to fulfill his destiny. He took one half of the broken staff and returned it to the Vale of Eternal Blossoms, prepared to save Pandaria. The Legion had invaded to the north. A great battle was taking place at the Well of Eternity, and soon, very soon, it would end. Xiao Hao returned to his people and tried to give them confidence, but there was none to be given. The Sundering was at hand, and its fury would change the face of Azeroth forever. There was nothing that could be done to stop it. All Xiao Hao could do was shield them from annihilation. With Shaylun in his grasp, Xiao Hao committed his final breath to protecting his land and all who lived within it. This staff had saved countless lives before, and in one moment, it saved countless more. Free of all his burdens and negative emotions, Xiao Hao became one with the land. Through Shaylun, his spirit was transformed, surrounding Pandaria as a great mist. Pandaria drifted away, immune to the chaos that gripped the rest of the world. The Sundering passed the land by, and for thousands of years, the mists would continue to protect Pandaria. But although Xiao Hao disappeared that day, Shaylun remained. Shaylun was found shortly after Xiao Hao's ascension. Monks brought it to the Terrace of Endless Spring for safekeeping, where it stayed for millennia. Several generations ago, a Mistweaver master wrote at length about its history and meaning. It was not Shaylun that prompted Xiao Hao to make his sacrifice. It was not Shaylun that inspired Kang's revolution that freed his people. It was not Shaylun that kept the serpent's spine standing against countless mantid cycles. But it was there for all of those events. In the possession of people who could act, it is the perfect companion to those willing to sacrifice everything in order to save others. And I believe that it has not yet found its final bearer. Master Sun Tzu, Mistweaver of the Terrace of Endless Spring. And now it's in my hands, which I use all the time as a transmog whenever I play Mistweaver in dungeons or raids, which I do quite often, because as I said, Mistweaver is one of my most favorite healing specs in the entire game. And now for the Windwalker. Which you're probably going, where are they? Well, they're right here. Alright, hold on. Let me go, I had them transmogged. Let me go ahead and get rid of that.
Lucky do's and root.
There we go.
May your feet find good trails.
Yeah, remember, these are fist weapons, so if you don't have them, they'll just kind of disappear, and you'll look like you have no weapons at all. So hold on a second. Let me just double-check the appearance here. Which one I want to use here. Whoa! I'm sorry, I just love the dashing and mobility of the Windwalker. Alright. Yeah, let's just go with that one. I would love to have either those or even these, because these look like Wolverine's claws. I'm just saying, I would love to have that. If you're curious how you get the secret appearance, because I don't have that, you gotta do the Wither training in Suramar, which you can probably imagine I'm not really that interested in doing that all over again. Alright, so This is kind of the upgrade appearance, so. The Fists of the Heavens. The last thing that Azeroth needed, on top of all its other problems, was to suffer another elemental invasion. It was a good thing that you cut down Typhonius so quickly. Had he gone unopposed, he might have become truly unstoppable once he mastered these weapons. But now the Fists of the Heavens are in your hands. You have a balanced heart. You seek harmony in all things. There is perhaps no other creature on Azeroth more capable of wielding this hurricane of power than you. For reference, the quest where we go to acquire these weapons is in the elemental plane of wind. We don't have to take on Thunderon or anything, but we do have to take on one of those kind of guys, just to give you an idea. The type of enemy we have to face is basically like one of these guys. So, and we do that with Lily. So, I know some people just can't stand Lily, but she makes me smile. I think she's adorable. It has not been long since Uldum was revealed to the world, and thus many fragments of the Tol'Vir's history are still hidden from us. Still, it is becoming clear, the Fists of the Heavens are some of the finest weapons that their society has ever created, and they are also some of the most dangerous artifacts that the world has ever seen. There are tales of an ancient weaponsmith, a master without peer among the Tol'Vir. His name was Irmat. His name is known to all surviving Tol'Vir as one of the most exceptional minds to have lived in Uldum, and also a cautionary lesson. Irmat was driven to create incredible works, but his pride turned out to be his undoing. The Titans created the Tol'Vir to protect key locations across Azeroth. Over the millennia, some fell to the forces of darkness, but for a very, very long time, Uldum did not. Irmat, its weaponsmith, worked tirelessly to arm his brethren with the finest instruments possible. For Irmat, his work was not simply a duty, it was his calling. He saw his hands as extensions of the Titan's will, and he wanted something less than to give his creations the ability to restore order to all chaos. He began to imbue his weapons with magic, using different sources of power to inspire him. The power of air in particular held a special interest to him. He secretly observed the Sky Wall, the realm of air in the elemental plane, and studied the way that its creatures lived and fought. Irmat forged 4 scimitars, representing 4 extraordinary Jinn Lords, and then in a ritual that stunned the Tol'Vir with its audacity, Irmat summoned and bound those very 4 lords within the weapons themselves. Their power now belonged to the Tol'Vir. Irmat's 4 scimitars became highly coveted among Tol'Vir warriors. Stories of their power rapidly spread, and messengers came from other Tol'Vir outposts, begging Irmat for more of those wonders. But the weaponsmith's satisfaction was short-lived. He had accomplished something great, but it was not perfect. Irmat had seen for himself the true elemental power of the Skywall. Even the captured might of 4 Jinns was but a light breeze compared to the ultimate power of that realm. Irmat carefully began crafting 2 new weapons. Not scimitars this time, 2 smaller weapons, one to be held in each hand. He named them Alberk and Alraed, and he intended for them to control a power that by its nature could never be tamed. After Irmat forged his new weapons, he declared them to be his finest work. These Fists of the Heavens would be capable of commanding the wind itself. All that was left was to capture the ultimate power within the Skywall, the Elemental Lord, Alakir. Uh-oh, I see where this is going. Irmat began the ritual slowly, not wanting to warn the Wind Lord of his plan. Is he really trying to do what, Thorasan did in Blackrock Mountain when he accidentally summoned Ragnaros? Oh my gosh. It took weeks of preparation, but once he was ready, it was over in an instant. The weaponsmith cast his spell, intending to open a portal to the Skywall and bind Alakir's essence. There was a great flash of light and a great rush of air, and when it was done, Irmat could feel his weapons. Alberk and Alraed, trembling with elemental power. He believed that he had succeeded. He believed that he had accomplished the impossible. His surety was what led to his death. Of all the elemental lords, Alakir was known to be the cleverest. When Irmat captured 4 of his most prized lieutenants, the Wind Lord was filled with wrath. But he recognized an opportunity to exact vengeance. He suspected that Irmat's pride would drive him onward. When Irmat's spell concluded, he felt Alakir's power quivering. But it was not the elemental lord's spirit. It was Alakir's trap. When Irmat hefted his 2 weapons and tested the power within them, uncontrollable fury spilled forth. The weaponsmith, his forge, and a number of buildings within Uldum were destroyed by the hurricane of might that had been unleashed. The weapons themselves were hurled miles away. The unfortunate Tolvir who first tried to recover them were similarly destroyed. Alakir had made Irmat's greatest creations unusable, filled with so much power that nobody could ever hope to control them. The Tolvir carefully locked the weapons away, burying them deep. For millennia nobody dared to touch them or repeat Irmat's folly. Alakir's lesson had been learned very well. The events of the Cataclysm changed Azeroth forever. Uldum was revealed to the world. The remnants of the Tolvir came under assault. Alakir and another elemental lord were slain by Azeroth's champions. Us. We slayed Alakir and Ragnaros. We have only begun to feel the ripple effects of those events. We do know that the death of Alakir left a power vacuum among the air elementals. That is, of course, until our shaman goes to basically revive Thunderon and choose a new Fire Lord in that campaign. His surviving subordinates went to war with one another, scrambling to secure leadership of the Skywall. None found any immediate advantage, for none were as powerful or as clever as their master had been. But one Jinn, Typhinius, sensed that there were still scraps of Alakir's power out there. The fists of the heavens would not stay buried for much longer. Lingering rifts in the skywall allowed Typhinius to leave quietly and hunt for something that would elevate him above his kin. He let his senses guide him and was led to an empty, nondescript part of the desert outside Uldum. When he dug into the sand, he found that the Tolvir had buried the fists of the heavens, Irmat's last creation. Typhinius realized that although Alakir was dead, the weapon's elemental chaos remained. But it seemed to be just slightly, more stable than when the Wind Lord lived. Still, when the Jinn first wielded the weapons, the resulting burst of power nearly destroyed him. But slowly and secretly, Typhinius learned how to keep his old master's power under control. When Typhinius returned to the Skywall with the fists of the heavens in his grasp, he immediately set out to end the air elemental's civil war. It was not simply his raw power that quelled them. They sensed the essence of their old master, and it compelled them to obey. There were those who refused, of course. Other Jinns believed that they could band together and overcome Typhinius' borrowed strength. A huge battle nearly ripped apart the Vortex Pinnacle, and a brutal clash in the Temple of Assad saw tremendous losses on all sides. In the end, Typhinius was not the cleverest. He was simply the strongest, and he overpowered his enemies. He flung the spirits of those who had opposed him into the other elemental realms. Alone, they could not stop their natural enemies from finishing them off in a slow and agonizing fashion. Typhinius declared that he was the rightful heir to Alakir, and that he would finish what the Windlord had started. This gives you an idea of the timeline of when this happens, where the monk goes there, does this quest to finish him off and take the weapons, then the shaman revives Thunderon and helps Thunderon become the new Windlord. Nice timeline continuity reference there. The war in the Skywall had caused more damage than Typhinius realized. It would take time for the air elementals to regain their strength and prepare for a full offensive. Typhinius had no interest in waiting. The moment that he felt the Burning Legion invade Azeroth, he knew that the mortal champions of the world would be preoccupied. He told his minions that there would be no better time. The raids on Uldum began almost immediately. The fists of the heavens swept away all early resistance. Typhonius's assault on Uldum was a serious strategic error. The civil war had not long passed, and the fighting power of the air elementals was still weaker than it might have been only a few months later. The only advantage they had were the weapons of Alberk and Alraed, but even Typhonius had not mastered their true potential yet. He could unleash carnage, yes, but most of his efforts had to be spent keeping Alakir's fury from ripping him apart. Typhonius's pride was fortunate for Azeroth. His ambition drew attention, and it was that attention that led to the discovery of his plans. He launched his war too soon, and even these weapons could not save him. The history of these weapons is marked with pride. The power that they contain can only be harnessed by a balanced mind and a harmonious spirit. Any arrogance, any cockiness, will inevitably lead to ruin for their wielders. But if you are already practiced in walking with the wind, the fists of the heavens will finally have a master who can make them truly legendary. Awesome stuff for all three weapons, especially Shaylun. Of those three, my favorite was definitely Shaylun. Very, very Mistweaver, if you know what I mean. So, by the way, I enjoy the monk campaign. It's not entirely super relevant, but it's fun, and it's very monk, if you know what I mean. If you play through the campaign, you'll get what I'm talking about. So I definitely highly recommend playing through Legion as a monk. Very fun campaign, very cool quests, and of course, monk is still just a very fun class to play. And we will be taking a look at another class's weapons and their lore when we return. Stay tuned.